you for your prayer support for Rose and myself. I'm sorry Rosemary's not able to be here. She's not able to travel these days by air because of her health condition, but as the Lord helps her, she is able to be involved in ladies' work, and we're involved in the local church, and as Andrew has just said, in schools as well. And there's a young lady who's going to come and help us this morning. With that young lady. Okay, and what is your name? Henrietta. Very good. Because your name is Samuel. But before we think about you, we're going to think about your mum. Because your mum's name is a palindrome. And I asked children, what's a palindrome? And some of them tell me, and some of them don't know it. And I say, well, we all know it. What is a palindrome? Something we spell forwards and backwards, and it's exactly the same. So do we know a girl's name like that? With 6 letters? 6 letters? Hannah. Okay, very good. So your mum's name was Hannah. And if Hannah lived in today's world, we would say she was an abused lady. Not because of what people did to her, but what people said to her. And you know, we live in a world like that where, unfortunately, people say all sorts of unkind words and unkind things, and it really hurts. Because, and really, boys and girls and men and women, when they hear those unkind things are being said, do cry. It hurts to be the end of someone's mouth. And so she thought the reason why they were making fun of her was because she had no children. And she thought, I've got to talk to God about this. And she went to the house of God in Shiloh. And sadly, in the house of God in Shiloh, there was an old priest there. Maybe as a young priest he was in touch with God, but the older he was, the less in touch with God he was. And so there it was in the church, she started to pray. And as she prayed, the tears streamed down her cheeks. And her lips moved. And no words were coming out because she was praying in her heart. And she was making a vow to God. A vow is not something we make off the top of our head with no intention of keeping. It's something that we make from the heart. And to break that vow is sin. And she said, God, give me a boy child, and he's yours for the rest of his life. And this old priest saw her with tears streaming down her cheeks and her lips moving and no words coming out. And he said, Madam, you're drunk. And she said, no, I'm not drunk. I'm hurting on the inside. And you know, when I look at school classrooms and I see boys and girls with smiley faces, and I realize that for some of those children, it may not really be a smiley face, because things are difficult at home, and the only way to try and overcome that is to smile. And when I say things like that, I see boys and girls smiling or nodding their heads, and I realize, God, thank you, we're on the right level here. He said, well, God grants your request, and in the process of time, you were born. He called you Samuel, which means asked of God. Who knows over the years, you may have little Samuels, not necessarily little boys, but maybe things we pray to God about. And so, as a young person, very young, she fulfilled that vow, and she took you to the house of God. And when Hannah gave Samuel to God, she gave 1 out of 1, no more. But because she fulfilled that vow, God blessed her with 3 more boys and 2 girls. And so the lady was not a loser because she gave to God what she had promised. And I suppose at first your job was like you had little responsibility. But as you got older and older, you got other jobs as well. And one night you were in your bed, fast asleep, and you heard your name, Samuel. And you get up and you run to Eli. He said, I didn't call you. Go back to bed. And he hears that name again, and he runs to Eli. It's in your dreams, son. Go back to bed. And he hears it again, the 3rd time. He runs to Eli, and he doesn't. Uh-oh. If it's not him who was calling? God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Samuel. I'm the leader around here. I should have told you about God over the years. But I'm sorry, I've forgotten. But go back. If you hear that voice again, I want you to say, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." And you go back to bed. And you hear that name again, Samuel, and you jump up, and said like this, "Speak, Lord, for your servant hears." And because he prayed and said those words, God heard that voice. And as Samuel got older and older, everybody knew from one end of the country to the other that Samuel was a prophet of God. And once he recognized that voice, he listened again and again and again and again. And here is the challenge, the punchline for our older friends here today. Samuel should have been taught about God by the leader in the church, but he failed in his responsibility. And so God stepped down, maybe a generation or two, to speak to someone, young though Samuel was, who had a listening ear to hear God's voice, and God spoke through him. May God bless his word to our hearts today. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.